Hello, our guest today is President and CEO of Total, Patrick Pouyanné. Welcome, Mr. Pouyanné.
Hello.
We'd like to begin by discussing the situation in the Middle East. As you know, Saudi Arabia and the Arab Emirates have broken off their diplomatic relations with Qatar. If this diplomatic crisis deteriorated, would it begin to impact your organization?
Total was founded in the Middle East in 1924, and it's an area we know well. We're presently very well established in Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and Saudi Arabia, and soon even Iran. But you know, we're first and foremost a commercial enterprise, and so we behave like Qataris in Qatar, Emiratis in the Emirates, and Iranians in Iran, which means that we work in each country in the interests of the countries. What I see and observe with interest is that big Western countries are now trying to appease this tension, which is frankly not in the interest of many people, because the real enemy today in this region is Daesh and terrorism.
From a business point of view, we know that Total is actively conducting business in several countries around the world with real geopolitical tensions. Do you think the real risk faced by Total today are more geopolitical than economic? Even now, Total remains profitable with oil below $50.
Total operates wherever there is oil and gas. We don't dictate where we find it. Again, we're principally a commercial enterprise. We don't have a diplomatic force. Gas is produced in Qatar and connected to Abu Dhabi by pipe. Everyone might have considered that during a crisis like this, the pipe could have stopped on both sides, either from the producer or the consumer end.
And this is not the case?
It's not the case, no.
What do you say to cynics who claim that geopolitical tensions, wherever they are in the world, are ultimately the business of oil companies like Total, since tensions increase prices and so boost results? How do you respond to them?
Our business, well, look, we're in the commodities market. Price volatility is firstly not driven by geopolitics, even if everyone applies a geopolitical interpretation to everything. It's mainly, and as markets have shown over the last 2 years, driven by supply and demand. With too much supply and not enough demand, prices decrease and vice versa. These are the fundamentals. And oil and gas are concentrated in just 8 to 10 countries that have 80% of the reserves: the Gulf, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the US. It's a combination of geopolitics and oil and gas.
After the lifting of international sanctions, Total was the first of the big Western oil groups to sign a memorandum of understanding to operate the largest gas field in the world, South Pars in Iran. So the question arises of when the final signing of the contract will be. When will we see Total's first dig in the ground in Iran?
We signed a memorandum of understanding in November last year, and we're the first to do so, the first to be bold. We're actually operating on a giant gas field which is shared between Qatar and Iran, so there too, it's a bridge between the two countries. It'll be an important development for the domestic Iranian market and the development of the Iranian economy, and we'll put pen to paper in the next few weeks.
A brief word on Donald Trump's foreign policy in this region. Do you understand the logic and coherence of the American president, who does business with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, while allowing diplomatic tensions to mount with Qatar and at the same time maintaining a military base in Qatar?
You have to ask President Trump what his policy and strategy are. I think that President Trump has stumbled across a number of diplomatic issues. I'm not sure we can talk yet about strategy and policy. On the subject of American diplomatic policy, it's going to take a little time, I think, to be put in place. If you take note, you'll see that the main request made to Qatar these days is to stop their support for Hamas, which is regularly, I'd say, in the background of the US administration's agenda and also in this crisis. So I think that maybe the most important agenda item for President Trump in the Middle East is the Israeli-Palestinian issue that he might like to move forward on.
On the European agenda, we have the Brexit negotiations, which opens this week. Theresa May has recently been snubbed by losing her absolute majority in the general election. Doesn't Europe now have everything to gain following a weakening of the British Prime Minister? And can they not finally forge a better deal in these negotiations?
I think that what's happened regarding Brexit is absolutely not a good thing for anyone, either for Great Britain or Europe. I think that now the real subject for Europe, which is thrown into relief by Brexit, is the revival of the European project. The British probably separated from this project because it wasn't attractive enough. But the people in our countries also partially dispute the European project. We have a Eurozone with a single currency. We should strengthen this and equally clarify, with respect to European citizens, what the duties of the Commission and the states really are. We have a continent with 500 million people. It's a big market, but the free market is incomplete in many areas. For example, in energy, which promotes as much investment in solar energy in the north of Germany as in the south of Spain. It isn't complete in the digital domain either. Why are all major players in the digital arena Americans? It's not a question of scientific expertise. It's that the US market is a 350 or 400 million people market strong, which is completely unified. When you develop and invest, you have immediate access to this market. In Europe, markets are still fragmented, and that's the real challenge.
On a encore des marchés fragmentés. C'est ça les vrais défis de l'Europe.
You travel frequently. Do you think that the election of President Macron has changed the view of decision makers and foreign investors in France, and France as a business location?
Yes, definitely. This election was a leap into modernity due to the age of our new president and the rhetoric he uses, which is also open, actually. The political divide that Macron proposes is, I'd say, different to the old liberalism/socialism split. What he's asking instead is, do we want a policy of openness to new technologies, to Europe, to entrepreneurship, as opposed to looking inward? In this election, half the people voted against the political system, so I think that makes our country competitive and totally attractive.
That lends the image of a France that wants to modernize. Is it too early to tell?
You know, what struck me in this election, and again during several political moments, was this debate on globalization, this refusal somewhere along the line. Almost 50% of the people voted against the market economy. For a group like ours, which is a global group that has succeeded in taking advantage of this market economy, we're part of the winners of globalization. I think we need to find ways and bring answers to the people who are against it.
Precisely what is the most urgent reform that must be implemented by President Macron to make France more attractive as a location?
The country is afflicted by youth unemployment. Work must be found for the young. Everything must be done, absolutely, to give them work. There are several mechanisms, and one of these, without a doubt, is the right to work, which we know is too complicated and which stifles entrepreneurship. Of course, you have to have good systems of protection, but people must be more incentivized to work than to stay at home. It's not a criticism. I'm not going to say that you mustn't take that option, but I think it's very important that the value of work is recognized in this country and takes primary value.
La valeur travail soit reconnue dans ce pays comme étant la première valeur.
Merci à vous, merci d'avoir été notre invité. Patrick Pouyanné, donc président directeur général de Total. Merci.
Merci.